And boy, do I wish I would have looked that up before I read these chapters, because then maybe I would have been prepared for what went down. When I tell y'all, literally like jump scare every single twist and turn. I mean, I was literally like,
Yes.
what? So I wish I would have looked that up, because maybe I would have known what the fuck was up.
Right. Tricking and deceiving. How much more literal could we get? Hi everyone. Welcome back to the Book on Fantasy podcast.
I'm Addison.
I'm Lorraine, and we are two best friends who explore the world of fantasy through book, shows, and movies, but with a heavy emphasis on books. Today we are covering Onyx Storm chapters 34 through 37, and our quest squad has moved on to the Isle of Hedotus. This was surprisingly very intense. I think I was sort of expecting it to be a chiller place because of, Hedian, wisdom and knowledge. Maybe they'll all be kind. Yeah, that was not the case at all. In fact, I'd say they're almost just as ruthless as Unreal.
Well, especially because the Isle's described as like a peaceful, knowledge-pursuing people. And in reality, they're just douchebags.
Basically. As a quick reminder, we are a spoiler-free podcast. We have only read up to the chapters we are covering and no further, so we have no idea what's to come in the rest of the book. With that being said, we will be discussing chapters 34 through 37 specifically, but it is likely that references to the previous chapters, as well as Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, will come back up. If you are not caught up, then definitely stop here and then come back when you are. Furthermore, we would like to remind everyone that this is an adult podcast where we will have adult conversations. Explicit language or potentially triggering topics may be discussed, so please be mindful of that and adjust accordingly. Housekeeping. If you are reading along with us, then next week's episode will cover chapters 38 through 43. And second, if you are a fan of our Onyx Storm coverage, then the very best way for you to support us is to leave us a review and share with a friend who loves the Empyrean series as well. This helps us find more fantasy book lovers and continue growing our little book club community. So let's get into the episode. We will start with the book report, where Addison will summarize each chapter, and then next we will convene a meeting of the assembly where we will deep dive, analyze, and theorize each chapter. Finally, to end the episode, we will share our favorite moments from the set of chapters discussed. With that being said, Addison, please give us the book report.
Happily. Chapter 34. Talia tries to get to Xaden under the guise of bringing food, but Violet isn't having it. She tells Talia that Xaden needs some space and she has to respect that. Talia agrees, but asks Violet if they would be willing to come to dinner so they could meet the family and the triumvirate. Although Violet is reluctant, she agrees to at least ask Xaden. Violet finds Xaden on the veranda, and despite his best efforts to avoid any tough and meaningful conversation, Violet's words ring true. Sex is not going to fix the real problem. Boo! The two then have an absolutely heartbreaking conversation about Xaden's childhood and the relationship they both have, or didn't have, I should say, with their mothers. Xaden ultimately agrees to go to dinner, and Violet realizes they will be tested by the triumvirate. Violet begins scheming, or should I say planning, and a little while later she and Mira take some dried almond to Talia to make some tea to go with dinner. Chapter 35. Dinner is served, and the triumvirate is everything but wise. They thought they were going to bully Xaden Ryerson into marrying anyone but the love of his life, Violet Sorngale. That's 2 R's, baby. Turns out the triumvirate wasn't interested in testing their knowledge. They wanted to dissect their life choices to see how wise they were. But the quest squad came to play, and they did not back down. We got not 1, but 2 swoon-worthy clapback speeches from both Mira and Arik, and with the help of Violet's analysis of the city setup and the fact that Violet just so happened to be bonded to the one-of-a-kind 7th-rated dragon, they were able to win over 2 of the 3 members of the triumvirate. Before they could win over Ferris, it was time for dessert. And it turns out the servants of the wisest isle can't count and forgot to bring 4 forks out of 10, which is totally not suspicious at all. Talia starts babbling about the chocolate cake, and Ferris mentions that Talia had been buying all of the chocolate for weeks. And Violet's scribe brain went into overdrive. There was something in the cake. Violet quickly stopped Xaden and Arik from eating the cake, and Kat and Mira followed suit, but Violet was too late. Garrick had already eaten a third of it. Garrick fell back from the table and stopped breathing. And so did Addison when she read this. Chapter 36. The squad immediately sprang into action to help Garrick. Violet questions Ferris about what he gave them, but Ferris refused to answer. In fact, he continued to refuse even after Violet revealed her clever plan. Turns out Ferris wasn't the only one who poisoned part of dinner. Violet did too with her armament leaves. Violet offers Ferris a deal, an antidote for an antidote, but he can't lose and says no. Violet tells Dane to get her father's research on Hedotus while she and Riddick head to the kitchen to question the cook. She finds him in the pantry and he refuses to tell Violet what the poison was. For an isle that is all about wisdom, they sure do not make wise choices because he then tries to attack Violet. She quickly flicks her daggers and kicks him backwards. Between the blue on the cook's hands and Riddick's comment, Violet pieces together what Garrick had been poisoned with. But before she could tell Riddick, the cook attacked again, lodging a knife in Riddick's side. Chapter 37. You can stop crying. Riddick is fine. Turns out the blade only caught the edge of Riddick's light jacket. Good news for us, but bad news for Riddick because our boy hates sewing. But I'm sure he won't mind sewing on his new Quest Squad patch that he makes Violet promise to get for him. Violet and Riddick make their way back to the dining room where she finds the antidote for the Zakia berries in her dad's research. She tells Dane to get the figs Talia brought them earlier and some glasses of water. They give Garrick the antidote and thanks and all, he is fine. But Ferris is about to not be. An angry Xaden pins Ferris with a knife, but Violet talks him down. Violet gives everyone orders to prepare to leave, and she and Xaden are left with a triumvirate. If I didn't already love Violet, I do now. Using the antidote and Andarna, she expertly maneuvers Ferris into agreeing to an alliance and letting them all leave the Isle unharmed. Checkmate. The squad begins the journey to Zelna, and just when Violet starts to worry about the distance, they see land. As they approach the Isle, they realize something isn't right. There are hundreds of people waiting for them, and they're smiling and waving, ? They quickly land and begin to prepare for whatever weirdness is going on, when Violet notices a familiar wave of energy rush up her body, which reminded her of magic. And that concludes the book report.
Wow.
Wow, indeed.
Crazy. Well, thank you for that book report. And without further ado, let us convene our meeting with the Assembly, starting with our overarching thoughts.
All right, guys, I'm not going to lie. For the last 2 episodes, I feel like my overarching thoughts have lacked their normal sparkle. But baby, the sparkle is back, so prepare yourselves, okay? First, let me start off by setting the scene on how I initially consumed these chapters because it colored my entire experience and my notes thus far. Lauren and I recorded, and it wasn't crazy late, but it was getting there. Afterwards, we chatted a bit, and then I stayed up too late, as usual, to work on some other stuff. So it was probably like 1 in the morning when I looked at the clock, and I was like, oh shit, I need to shower and go to bed. So I get in the shower, I start listening to the chapters because on my first read of any book, I always consume for enjoyment with my audiobook. I finished chapter 34, and I'm like, all right, I'm just going to put on my headphones and listen for a few more minutes until I get sleepy. That absolutely did not fucking happen. I listened to them all, and y'all, Rebecca Yarros got me so fucking good. And when I tell you I was silent, screaming and crying, I am not lying. I was trying to be chill because my husband, who keeps a normal sleep schedule, was asleep, and it was like 3 in the fucking morning. And first with Garrick and then Riddick, and I was just fucking done for after this set of chapters. This was not the set of chapters like, oh, I'm gonna listen till I get sleepy, because I never got sleepy. Not once. I was like, holy fuck, holy fuck, holy fuck. And I couldn't stop. I had to finish it. It's funny when I think about it because I really thought going into this set of chapters that Talia and the whole, I abandoned you as a child thing was going to be the most important focus in this set of chapters. And I was so wrong. I feel like that was almost like a C or D plot.
I was a little disappointed because I think you're set up to feel like you're going to get like a bunch of context about why she left and how it's important to the plot, but really it just didn't. It was sad. It was very emotionally damaging. But then aside from that, I was kind of like, oh, okay. We figure out the reason and then it just bye.
Basically didn't matter at all. But I thought what went down in Umbral was very exciting. And boy, compared to this, I was wrong. Hedotus really took the cake. You know what I'm saying? Get it?
Yeah. Yes, I do.
Next, can I just say that I think the people in Hedotus are the fucking worst. Even though in Umbral they had to fight potentially to the death, at least it was with like some level integrity of honor, right? I mean, when you think about it, Umbral was very similar to Besgaiath in a lot of ways. You settle your shit on the mat, the winner takes all. But Hedotus, those people, they were sneaky, conniving assholes.
Yeah,
The
they
fact that
definitely are.
Ferris refused to buckle, I was just like, this man is unhinged. The moment you knew you were going to die,
Yes.
I would have been like, here's the antidote. So sorry about the
Exactly.
misunderstanding. Please don't
He's
burn
like,
us with your
"No,
dragons.
I have 40 minutes and you have 20 minutes, so I win." And I'm like,
What?
no, you're gonna be dead anyway.
Well, and I'm like, what is the end game here too, right? Because there's 8 fucking dragons on your isle. I'm sure they can light it up in under half an hour and everybody will die. It just, anyway, okay, we'll talk about it when we get there. But
Yeah.
despite all of that, though, I somehow found the greeting in Zelna to be incredibly disturbing. I can't really express why I found it so off-putting, but I'm weirdly very anxious about their visit there. We'll talk more about it in the last chapter. And last but not least, I debated including this, but you know what? It was like 3 a.m. I was riding the high of these chapters and I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna include it. I should have trusted my instincts. Unfortunately for me, I did not. In the last episode, I went back and forth several times about including a note that I felt like Violet's thoughts about Asher's research, specifically the part when she mentions to Mira about the Zakia berries and if the birds got there too late and they're overripe, the flock drops dead. Quote, their little yellow beaks stained blue, unquote. I think it was because that was such like a vivid visual description. And I just knew in my gut that was foreshadowing. And I didn't fucking say it. And for those of you who have been listening along with us, you know, I in fact did not include that in the episode. I decided against it because, you know, our episodes gets really long. There's a lot of no's. And I'm like, I can't say every single thing is important because then nothing is important if everything is important. And now I have to live with the consequences of that choice every fucking day. I could have been triumphant in my superior foreshadowing detection. And alas, now I can never officially prove it. But for those of you who believe me, I did think about it and I just didn't say it and put it in the episode.
We did talk about the berries, though, just in relation to possible poisons, I think. It was like part of a general discussion. We didn't know exactly how it was going to manifest.
I know, but I remember having like a very explicit thought about like the birds and the blue and the yellow beaks. And I just wish I would have just thrown that in there, but I didn't. Now I have to live with the consequences of that choice.
You never know with this book, honestly.
I know.
So, yeah, overall, I thought the twists in this set of chapters were particularly interesting and exciting to read because both parties had their own plots that get revealed in like some really dire moment. Garrett gets poisoned, but then Violet's like, actually, I poisoned you guys too. So you have like a standoff situation. I agree that I don't really care for the culture of Hedotus, but I did feel like their behavior and actions were consistent. Like once you see what's going on and then you reflect on how they structured everything, I was like, okay, well, at least they're consistently assholes. Yes.
That's true. There's a very clear pattern of behavior in their thought process and decision making. And once you figure that out, you're just like, yeah, you're all just assholes all the time.
Yeah, like Ferris refusing to give them the antidote despite him dying is really messed up, but at least he stuck to his guns and like the rules of their culture and was
fair enough.
I want to be smart. Well, I will say I don't think that particular part was very wise. Like you'd rather die than be bested in this game of chess, quote unquote. I guess when intelligence is prized above anything else, it makes sense why he'd rather die than have others find out that he was outsmarted. Although I feel like that's a little bit more of like an ego thing than a smart thing.
Oh, totally. I don't think it's very wise to die to protect your ego. You know what I'm saying?
Right. So overall, as I talk about later, I think the experience in Hedotus is meant to be a lesson on the danger of, I guess, like overly selecting for one particular trait in a culture. And I think that is something we also saw in Umbriel as well. And we'll maybe continue to see in the other isles, maybe each of these in specifically choosing to only have like one thing that they worship, I guess, and like choose that trait above anything else. It's actually going to show that there is inevitably a downside to that. And then I did think it was interesting that you felt like Umbriel was honorable because they were, but I also was like, the priestess and the court tricked them into a 3-pair fight that wasn't disclosed. And then Violet, who was assumed to be the weakest, was thrown into the ring because I'm willing to bet they thought it would be an easy win. And so ultimately, I feel like all of these Isles have some trick up their sleeve. None of them are forthcoming with their intentions ever. So
I mean, is anyone in this book at all forthcoming with their
that's true.
intentions? Like, at
True.
all?
Yeah. But anyways, with that being said, let's get into the actual analysis for each chapter, starting with chapter 34. So we have the excerpt. This was our first excerpt on Hedotus, the Isle of Hedion, by Captain Asher Sorrengail. As a scribe, it makes sense that Papa Sorrengail would enjoy his time in the Isle of Hedotus, given it's known for knowledge and wisdom. But as we see shortly, the artifice of the Isle rings true because they definitely plotted and schemed the entire meeting with the quest squad. I would definitely say this foreshadows the events that take place between the Triumvirate and the quest squad. But I think it also foreshadows that we definitely needed to be wary of Hedotus because of the tricks that we see they had up their sleeves.
For those of you who are like me and did not immediately know the definition of artifice, I looked it up for us. Artifice means
Yay!
clever or cunning devices or expedients, especially as used to trick or deceive others. And boy, do I wish I would have fucking looked that up before I read these chapters, because then maybe I would have been prepared for what went down. When I tell y'all, literally like jump scare every single twist and turn, I mean, I was literally like,
Yes.
what? So I wish I would have looked that up because maybe I would have known what the fuck was
Right,
up.
right. Yeah. Tricking and deceiving.
Mhm.
How much more literal could we get?
She literally spelled that out for us.
Yeah. So in this excerpt, it's also notable that Papa Sorrengail is now a captain. So he's ranked up since his time in Dune, and he is now Asher Sorrengail. I'm assuming he must have married Lilith sometime between when he studied Umbriel and when he studied Hedotus. He also spent probably at least a few months in the Isle, and I wonder if Lilith was there with him or if this was research that he conducted alone. I don't think we talked about this before, but I do think it's interesting that he took Lilith's last name. I think it's cool that he did that, but I also wonder why they went with Lilith's instead of Asher's.
I was kind of like, maybe it's a cultural thing, or it was because of her military rank in her career. But then the other part of
Yeah.
my brain was like, what if it's something more nefarious? Like Asher was trying to hide who his family was or where he was from. And so there's
Yeah.
two competing thoughts there. But yeah, I did think that was interesting too.
Into the events. The meeting with Talia is awkward to say the least, as Violet converses with her about the possibility of everyone meeting for dinner together. Violet takes note of the similarities in physical features between Talia and Xaden, in particular noting that the gold flecks in their eyes make the biological link undeniable.
Except now the flecks in his eyes are amber and they may never go back. Ah, I hate that.
I do too. I choose not to think about it very often.
Good choice.
I also noted that Violet is able to send missives out because there was a ship leaving for Deverelli, which foreshadows the fact that since Deverelli and Hedotus trade and are in contact with each other, it hints that Hedotus had, as we find out, heard of their time in Deverelli and how things went down. I appreciate that Violet stands her ground with Talia and insists it's going to be up to Xaden regarding whether they'd attend dinner. But on a first read, I definitely almost felt bad for her because it felt like she was showing some remorse and maybe did, in fact, feel bad about leaving Xaden to grow up without her. But as we see later, she actually sucks and manipulated them for sure. I have a
Yeah.
more nuanced take in the next chapters after everything unfolds, but for now, those were my initial impressions.
Yeah, very similar. I think once Talia gives her explanation, Lauren and I have a lot more developed thoughts, but I really felt the exact same way in this moment. Of course, I was in Xaden's camp, and if he didn't want to talk to her, then I didn't think that he should. But a little part of me did feel sympathetic for Talia. I tried to put myself in her shoes, and of course, we know very little about her life in Tyrandor, but we know that Fen was a piece of work, and most likely was probably pretty miserable to be married to. And she was completely isolated from not just her friends and family, but quite literally anyone who could understand her cultural background and upbringing. And I imagine she felt extremely lonely and isolated. So a part of me did want Xaden to at least hear her out, but those feelings left very quickly as I kept reading. So
I also thought it was touching that Taryn notes that Gale wanted to torch Talia earlier because, as ruthless as that sounds, It's nice to know that Sigale still cares for Xaden despite the tension between them about, him being Benin and all that stuff.
Oh, all that little stuff. No big deal. Just petty writer dragon drama. I was dying when Taryn said, "The life giver is lucky she wasn't scorched this morning." And when he called her a life giver, that fucking took me out. Like, don't get me wrong, justified given the choices she made, but calling someone a life giver, oh my God, that is so insulting.
Taryn. Leave it to Taryn. Talia offers to ensure a meeting with the Triumvirate and some possible help in the test from them if they agree to go to dinner, which is Exhibit A of her manipulation. But with Violet standing firm in her support of Xaden, Talia states you must love him to prioritize his feelings over your ambition. He risked Erasure. Then he loves you too. His father never would have. I wasn't quite sure how to read this response initially. It almost felt like it was totally novel for her to hear of someone doing something, quote, illogical, like risking the safety of their home out of love. But it also felt like she realized the depth of Xaden's true feelings for Violet in that moment. I guess it makes sense that choosing your actions based on love for someone over logic would be weird for her since she grew up in Hedotus, which definitely seems like a place that prioritizes making smart, quote unquote, decisions over emotional or like moral ones, but it's just interesting.
That response stuck out to me as well. Based on what we know of Talia and her previous marriage and her current marriage, I think it's pretty safe to say that Talia has never experienced true unconditional love from either of her husbands. We know that Fen was an absolute peach with the whole save love for your children. And based on what we learn about Ferris in this set of chapters, I think it's safe to say he may care for Talia, but he definitely doesn't love her unconditionally. And he clearly didn't care enough about her dying to give over the info for the antidote. I think Talia's response is reflective of that. And honestly, I think she is in awe that Xaden, despite his upbringing, has the capacity for that.
Talia leaves and Violet takes the silver tray of snacks to go find Xaden out on the balcony. It seems color-wise, Hedotus likes cream-colored things, which is noted by the color scheme in the room they're staying in. It's primarily decorated in, it says, cream, pale green, and gold colors. And actually, I do find the color association kind of interesting since the scribes in Biscayeth wear cream-colored robes, which kind of fits in with the primary colors of Hedotus. Riddick and Garrick leave the balcony to give them some privacy, and Violet finds Xaden sitting on the floor looking out towards the ocean. And this was definitely a very emotional chapter, to say the least, and it really made my heart hurt for Xaden.
Xaden!
But first, Xaden shows Violet the serum and antidote vials Bodhi had given her to take on the trip. First of all, awkward. Second of all, he says, they fell out of her pack, which could be true, and this is me being extremely suspicious. But do you think maybe he was snooping, possibly for Violet's conduit for power, and found those instead? If that's the case, then I definitely think it was Baden taking the lead on that. But kind of makes you wonder a little bit.
How dare you? How dare you question Xaden's integrity? Oh my God, I can't even look at you.
How dare you come back at me? I was like, I've definitely listened to you in the past be like, he's so jealous. Blah, 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 blah.
Okay, listen, that was different, okay? That was different. Yes, I see what you're saying. I really don't think so. That would seem really out of character for Xaden, especially in the context of his relationship with Violet. I feel like they really, truly, and deeply trust one another, and that is like a foundational pillar of their relationship.
Yeah.
And so I really don't think he was snooping. I really don't.
Okay, so let me clarify. Not snooping because he was suspicious of Violet, but just like, because I keep thinking about that excerpt about the ace-ranked venom and how like the venomness starts to come out after 24 hours. And he has clearly gone over 24 hours at this point. And again, we don't know if he's an ASIM yet, but I mean, the time is building since he has drawn power.
That's true. Yeah.
And so I'm just wondering if or when that shoe's going to drop and we're going to see this flip come out because of the venomness. Not because, again, Xaden at his core is this person, but because the venom in him.
The venomness.
Like, run.
Because of the venomness.
Yeah.
Lorena's pinching her fingers together like the Italians. The venomness.
The venomness, yes. But yeah, regardless, I'm glad he didn't necessarily take offense to it and recognizes it's entirely possible she may have to use them on him at some point because he says, I'd rather be powerless than potentially hurt you. Oh,
Oh, see, to me, he actually seemed relieved that she hadn't. I think he was happy that she had anything at her disposal to protect her from his venom side. So I thought
oh
that was
yeah.
kind of interesting that he was like, no, I'm glad you have it. And like, please use it, you know?
Right, yeah. Zayden changes the subject to Sigale, noting that she's pacing for some reason, but worrying isn't in her nature. She likes to solve the immediate problem and handle consequences later. I was wondering if there's something else going on with Sigale, mostly because Zayden says it's not in her nature to worry. Initially, I assumed Sigale was just uneasy about Talia, since she probably knows the full story and likely was also uncomfortable from the lack of magic. But this did give me some pause. I don't have any theory or anything about it, but I just wanted to note it.
Honestly, I just took this as Sigil was just in a blind rage because of Talia. I don't care
Mm.
how mad Sigil is at Zayden. She loves Zayden, and I guarantee she knows Zayden's entire life story. She wanted blood and revenge for abandoning Zayden as a child and the pain that has caused him. And so I think when she saw Talia, the life giver, she was like,
True.
hell no.
Zayden then picks up sugared dried fig, which foreshadowing for later. But he begins to open up about Talia, stating she never even told me she was from Hedotus. Neither of them did. As I stated in the last episode, I do wonder if this marriage between Fen and Talia was brokered by Deverelli. Even if it wasn't, I do wonder what was offered for this marriage. We know Tyrandor needed an heir, but what did Hedotus get out of this union from Tyrandor? Both places are known to be cunning and strategic, so I would imagine there was something Hedotus was angling for.
Yeah, that's interesting. As usual, we would just like to know more. More information would be helpful.
Always and forever.
Zayden also says that it makes sense why they never had family visit. We speculated on that in a previous episode. Does Zayden have any other extended family? And if so, where are they? He still might. We don't know what Talia's situation is, in terms of her parents or brothers and sisters, etc. But now knowing she was from Hedotus, it makes sense why Zayden didn't know them growing up. He also, in this conversation, says, the bedtime stories hold with Armin-T. This is foreshadowing for what Violet does later and plays on his nostalgic memory with Talia to poison the triumvirate using the Armin. So I thought that was a nice little tie-in.
I also thought it was interesting that Violet states the sugar on the fig is actually a mineral called violetrite. It's apparently very common on Hedotus and turns paler eye colors purple. Considering how fascinated Ferris was to see Violet's hazel eyes, I did wonder if this mineral or something connected to it is going to come back up again later. Violet also once again wonders when Papa Sorrengail would have had time to study the Isles and then wonders if her grandmother knows something. I do think that this is going to be a key part of the plot. Ultimately figuring out why Papa Sorrengail studied the Isles in the first place. I think I said this last episode, but I'm starting to feel like it's maybe leaning more towards figuring out how to cure the venom. And since we know he was also studying feathertails, I'm still not sure how those things connect, but I mean, obviously there's a reason he's studying these things. So just waiting for the answers. Violet informs him of Talia's request to have dinner, which Zayden is understandably not inclined to partake in, and proposes they screw the dinner and go to bed instead.
Oh no, not just go to bed. He had many, many ideas on what they could do once they were in the bed, okay? And to be honest, Bella is a better woman than I am because I would have caved immediately. No question. I would have been like, yeah, fuck your mom, fuck the triumvirate.
As we discussed last episode about this growing sense that maybe there is something deeper to the reason Violet and Zayden are so connected to each other, there was another quote that I wanted to point out. Violet thinks, I missed the heightened rush from our signets, his shadows flaring, my lightning cracking. Losing control is part of what makes us us. I'll try to stop harping on this every time it comes up, but the losing control thing and something about how their powers both complement and perfectly combat the other is just feeling very intentional in terms of its importance to the plot. At this point, I think we're just waiting to find out why them and why their powers. As lovely as another spicy scene sounds, Violet realistically points out that sex is not going to fix the real problem, and Ain't that the truth of all truths?
Damn it, Violet and her pure intentions and good heart. She ruined a good thing for us.
Just as a quick note, things are progressing, however, for Kat and Traeger as they walk the beach holding hands, which is just so cute.
I know. I'm really enjoying Relationship Watch. Now I'm just ready for something to happen between Mira and Drake. We didn't get much of them in this set of chapters. I was kind of sad about that. I'm ready for it.
Same. After taking a moment to check on Violet's healing wounds, the convo turns back to the possibility of dinner. Despite a snarky response from Xaden about her being charmed in 3 minutes, I love that Violet, who is still grieving the loss of her own mother, does not hold it against him and chooses to answer with compassion. She says, I would give anything for 10 minutes with my mother. You have to do whatever's best for you, whatever you can live with once we leave here. Whatever choice you make will be the right one as far as I'm concerned. You have all my support. I feel like that was such an emotionally mature response. She wasn't judging him for not wanting to see his mother. She understood that Xaden's snarky response was a reflection of his own pain. And then on top of that, she still chooses to reassure him in the end that it's his choice and that she would support him in whatever his decision ultimately is.
I totally agree. I was really proud of how Violet handled the situation. I think she was just the perfect balance of loving and supportive, but also holding Xaden accountable for making a decision and then also following it up with assuring him in whatever choice he makes, she'll be supportive. I really love when she said, whatever choice you make will be the right one as far as I'm concerned. You have all my support. And I was just like, oh, damn it, Violet, you're so good at this. In reality, being this socially, emotionally intelligent is really impressive, especially when you throw in the context of how she had a very complicated relationship with her own mother and the fact that she literally just died. We're talking like 3 months ago, 3 months. I mean, not long at all. When you think about that in that context, it just makes it mind-blowing that she was able to navigate this conversation so well. And I just love Violet and I'm proud of her. She's a good partner for Xaden.
I do so hope Violet and her siblings will get a chance to have some sort of like final goodbye or get some closure for themselves about what happened to Lilith because, as we've discussed before, none of them have done any of that yet.
No time. Crisis mode, baby.
I know.
But
I
also,
feel like, they should do it at some point. We get to the core of Xaden's hurt on the topic when he says, my mother abandoned me. How does she deserve my 10 minutes when she fed me chocolate cake on my 10th birthday and vanished later that night? I'm the fulfillment of a contract for her. Nothing more.
Wow. If that's not the worst thing I've ever heard in my life.
That hurt just reading it because I can't imagine how that would feel. To know your own mother didn't want to stay, it really doesn't even seem like she tried to fight that hard. I know we get her side of the story later, but, she didn't leave a note or even try to explain anything to him. She just leaves in the middle of the night without a word ever again. And from a child's perspective, that is awful. And he didn't deserve that because he had no choice in any of this, obviously. All he sees is that his mother didn't stay. And I think it makes a lot of sense that as a child, you would interpret that as your parent not loving you. Just sad.
Seriously, she couldn't even write a letter and leave it for him or one that gets given to him on his 16th birthday or just anything, right? Explaining, I know you won't understand, but I'll be in Hedotus, come visit me and I'll explain everything. Nothing. She was just like, here's some cake. Bye. You're like, wow. Yeah, she sucks. She sucks. I hate it. I hate her. But I am with Violet in this moment. I knew she left, which was bad, but I didn't know how. And it is just fucking devastating.
Yeah, I agree. So after that, we touch back on what it's like for Xaden as a Venom now when he points out, I'm aware in the moments I lack emotion. It's like sliding over a frozen lake while a shrinking part of me screams that I'm supposed to be swimming in those pieces I've bartered away. It's messy and painful and infuriating. I get it now. It's not just the power that's addicting, it's the freedom to not feel this. Ugh, very sad. It is a little bit relatable at times, especially in the context of emotions that we tend to label as bad or less desirable or socially acceptable. For example, feeling really angry or feeling jealousy. Honestly, I took this just thinking symbolically about the real world and stuff. I don't think I would want to live without emotions. I think that seems kind of awful because I think all emotions are experienced to teach us something about our environment, ourselves, or about, other people around us. And B, you can't just get rid of some emotions because I think then you'd end up with a situation that parallels what we see in Hedotus and how it's this like logical but heartless culture. Emotions are the same way, I think, and each one is part of the human experience. Obviously, I believe that you do need to, be in control of your emotions and not let them control you all the time. But in general, they can serve as a compass for helping you figure out what actions to take. I was in my feels writing this. So,
Yeah, I can tell. I wrote, yeah, feelings are hard. No, but I mean, in the human world, I think you're absolutely right. I'm thinking about what Zayden's saying, what's happening to him in a vacuum and only about Zayden from Zayden's perspective.
yeah,
Zayden has experienced far more pain and devastation in his lifetime than most of us can ever even dream of. From his
right.
obviously complicated relationship with his father and mother, the burning of his home, to the weight of the responsibility of all the marked ones, and quite literally watching all of his family and his friends' families be executed by fire. And don't even get me started on the psychological toll Besguyth War College has taken on him. Given
True.
all of that, it's completely understandable why being able to pull the plug, so to speak, on his emotions is so enticing.
Yeah.
Honestly, of all the conversations we've had about being worried about Zayden being tempted, this conversation has me more worried than any of them. I think in hindsight, I wasn't as worried about Zayden feeling a draw to pull power because he was already so powerful to begin with. Take Jack Barlow, for example. He specifically talks about feeling powerless and wanting more. Remember, he's all mad because Taryn bonded Violet. He's like, why should we let the dragons choose how much power we can have? But Zayden doesn't
Yeah.
really have the same problem, right? That's not what drove Zayden to do it. But this, being able to not feel all of this pain and pressure, I mean, all of these feelings, that seems like it would be what's most tempting to Zayden. I know we've mentioned this before in a previous episode. I really believe that without Violet, he would have turned full Venom already. I think it's because of the positive feelings he feels for Violet, love, hope, peace, etc. That's what's
Yeah.
keeping him from fully going to the dark side.
Yeah, I
So,
agree with that. She reminds him of
what the world
the
can
human
be.
and, like,
Hmm.
the human Zayden, not
Yeah.
the Venom
Yeah.
Zayden. At this point, Sigale huffs steam at them and glares at Zayden, who begs her to go hunt. She launches into the sky and, in the process, almost takes out two boys who come outside. And then Taryn and Andarna follow suit as well. Also, as this happens, it's noted that Eris birds fly out of the trees. And on a first read, I didn't pay attention to that. But knowing what happens with the Zakir berries later, this was definitely some foreshadowing in retrospect. And also a callback to the last set of chapters in Deborelli when they talk about the Falerinia moss and the Zakir berries and Eris birds and all that stuff. Violet once again reassures Zayden that if he wants to go, they can, but after he ultimately agrees to stay, she adds Hedotus hasn't entered a war or aligned itself with any kingdom at war in its recorded history. They aren't going to help us. I think this is important just as some historical and cultural context about Hedotus. I do also think it factors into why Talia left immediately after the contract was filled. It also foreshadows our discovery that Hedotus had no intention of trying to help them in the first place. Their attention is interrupted by Talia rushing outside to check on the two boys, and we learn that they are actually her sons. My heart breaks for Zayden. This is really sad because clearly she married again and had two more children once she was back home. Now, whether this was also strategic as far as like marriage alliances go, it's unclear. But I get the vibe that this marriage seemed like one she did choose, or at least enjoys more than her marriage to Fen. Of course, from Zayn's perspective, it looks like she happily remarried and went about starting a whole new life and forgot about him.
Obviously, this wasn't in her control at all, but the fact that she specifically had two more sons is even more devastating. I can only imagine to Zayden, it feels like a direct replacement. And of course, Talia can't control the genders of her children, but that was just like another nail in the coffin, right?
Yeah.
Oh.
Zayden comments this feeling is one I would gladly exchange, and then it's followed by a thought from Violet about whether he knew there was a new fully charged conduit in her backpack. So this was the specific detail that really made me wonder if that's how he found the serum and antidote. And possibly it was a cover, but I don't know. I don't want to believe it because I don't like the implications, but I'm starting to feel like maybe it wasn't out of the realm of possibilities. Because it has been a couple days. I mean, I don't know exactly how much time it's been. I don't know.
I wrote, "How dare you" again.
I know.
I do see what you're saying, but I still stand by my point earlier that it feels like a violation of trust between Zayden and Violet. So agree to disagree.
I did, however, love when Violet says, "Don't barter it away, the pain. Give it to me. I will hold everything you don't want to feel because I love every part of you." Aww. Zayden fully agrees to attend the dinner, and Violet quickly realizes that after hearing the triumvirate would be attending dinner and that the kids were being sent away for the night, they were definitely going to be tested. Violet begins to plan her own schemes and instructs Darna to go follow the boys while she checks Brennan's medkit for a special plant. 2 hours later, and just before dinner is set to begin, Violet and Mira offer Talia a vial of arrangement. And Addison, you got it. That arrangement did indeed come back up, and it's a good thing it did because these triumvirates were sneaky as fuck. So
Oh my God. Thank you for remembering. When I read Dried Airman, I sure did squeal and fist pump the air. We will talk about it more when Violet reveals everything to the triumvirate. But this is not the first time arrangement has been mentioned in this book, and it was not the first time that we discussed it on this podcast. It was back in chapter 11.
Yeah.
But Addison was 100% correct. That shit did come back up, and at least I got that moment of victory.
Before we end this chapter, Violet sees Talia talking to the cook who scrubs at his nails with a blue-edged towel. When I first read this, I was like, oh, well, that seems kind of important. I didn't know why, and sure enough, it did turn out to be a clue later.
Oh, you're so good. It did not even give me pause for a single heartbeat. Not even for 1 second. But in my defense, I was still celebrating the arrangement thing, so, easy for me to miss.
All right, so that ends chapter 34. Moving on to chapter 35, the excerpt. This one was another one from Major Worley's Guide to Appeasing the Gods, and the focus was on Hedian. It states the god of wisdom is tricky to placate, and contrary to what you'd expect, Hedian only seems to answer those who don't pray to him. After this set of chapters, this actually doesn't surprise me. Hedian and those who follow his style, like the Triumvirate, are some sneaky tricksters, and turns out they're pretty heartless too. In a way, it kind of makes perfect sense. It's better to make your own plans and adjustments rather than rely on the belief that someone else is going to help you. And in this case, that someone else refers to a god. That seems like exactly the lesson we see out of the Triumvirate, who literally live life according to what is most logical and just expect you to expect their tricks and games. Essentially, the wisest thing to do is basically trust no one. This is an outsider observation. I don't personally believe that, but
I was going to say, damn, Lorraine.
Preaches. No, yeah, I'm just observing what I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was like, this is going to make future episodes really awkward. No, I really like your analysis. I also took it as some light foreshadowing for Ferris's behavior and actions later, specifically when it says the god of wisdom is the trickiest to placate. Ferris, of course, is not a god, but this is a god that he prays to the most, thus his actions most closely reflect that. This is evident when Violet thinks once he realizes he will literally die, surely he will give her the info. But in a shocking twist, he refuses. And it made me reminiscent of the idea that anyone who, quote unquote, practices wisdom is likely to be extremely tricky to placate. I think that is kind of reflective of that in like this kind of weird circular way.
The dinner begins with a group of 10 people. We have Nairi, Rosalind, Ferris, and Talia representing Hedotus, and then we have Violet, Mira, Zayden, Kat, Auric, and Garrett for the
dinner.
Guest party.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
The dinner party. Not a very fun party. No balloons, no entertainment, poison cake.
Poison cake. Did not want to be there. Violet notes that the Triumvirate are wearing what looks to be sacred ceremonial robes that remind her of the scribe robes, so they are pastel green in color. I feel like this detail sort of ties into this idea that the different gods perhaps did influence the structure of Bisgayth War College. Last episode, it felt like the symbols of sword, the shield, the claw, fire, water, and the book also kind of felt connected to Bisgayth in a way. In this case, Hedian and Hedotus feel most aligned with the scribe quadrant.
Oh, yes. I really like that analysis from the last episode when you brought that up, and I think this definitely goes to support that.
I found it interesting that Violet notes Talia seems most on edge, and Xaden seems completely in his element and resembles the same man she met on Conscription Day. Violet adds that in addition to his Conscription Day-esque demeanor, she also thinks he's so cold I half expect the temperature around us to plummet. I think this is both an ode to his venominess and how he struggles with letting it just wipe away any negative hard feelings, as well as the overall difficulty he has with realizing his mother is alive and chose to leave him behind. He's like quite literally giving the cold shoulder toward Talia in the triumvirate. Dinner is served, which thankfully does not include any human heads.
It's so funny that Violet chants that under her breath. Don't be ahead, don't be ahead, don't be ahead. Because I kid you not, when I was reading this for the first time, I was literally thinking the exact same thing. As soon as they started describing the servants lifting a silver dome off the food, I started having flashbacks to Deverelli, and I was like, no.
I know.
I was really scared. I thought that was a nice, kind of funny tie-in that Rebecca Yarros did.
Yeah. I thought the phrase they say before dinner was notable, particularly the "may only our minds know" hunger part. Not only is this just kind of a cool detail to add to the world building of Hedonis, but I think it plays perfectly into their general adherence to avoiding emotion and conducting life purely based on logic and wisdom. I did find it a little ironic that the phrase also includes thanking Hedian for the satisfaction of thriving relationships, because I was like, are y'all for real? Like,
what?
you
Get
don't
out
give
of
a
here.
fuck about having true relationships with people. Every relationship they have is like purely strategic and transactional.
Yeah, only
Ugh.
if it's a wise relationship. I thought that was really weird too. And it seems like this is a daily prayer, they say, like over every meal or at least once a day. And so I'm like, every day y'all talk about the satisfaction of thriving relationships, and here you are poisoning people. And not to mention, as it's talked about kind of in the battle of wits throughout dinner, you've got a lot of powerful people in that room, in line to the Peromish throne, in line to the throne of Navarre, the Duke of Tyrandor. And you're going to fuck with these people? These are the ones? It's wild to me. The logic
Not very
crazy.
wise. Yeah.
Not very wise.
We also get another hint of Arik's knowledge of Hedonic when Violet thinks I'm somehow not surprised when Arik doesn't miss a beat. So many languages.
Yet again.
On a first read, I totally did not pick up on the armament trap, but on a second read, I was elated to see Ferris drink that tea.
And drink it up, baby.
Even more satisfying is to see he thought he was being clever by waiting for one of them to drink the tea first, and yet he still got.
No, I actually love that you pointed that out, because even on a reread, I don't think it clicked for me when Violet describes, like, he holds up his tea and there's an awkward pause. And it's like, oh, it's because he's waiting for one of them to drink it. Yeah, I kept missing that. I don't know why. In hindsight, I don't know how the hell it didn't occur to me that something was up with the tea, because when you go back and reread it, it is so obvious. You don't know exactly what, but all of a sudden, Violet is like, we're going to be tested. I have to do something. Get me Mira and the armament, and then takes it to Talia. And I'm like, how did I miss that?
Yes.
I mean, it's basically spelled out for you. Like, I should have known something was up with the tea. Did not at all.
Until it happened, I was like,
oh, I know. Like,
surprised.
Sometimes the more obvious stuff is actually harder because you overlook it versus when you're looking like for microscopic details, I think.
Yeah, that's true. As predicted, the main purpose of this dinner is to test the squad and their wisdom before any other politics can be conducted, and it's decided Talia will serve as witness. The questions begin, and Ferris starts off by asking if their dragons die when they do. So this is interesting because, like we talked about when they're in Deverelli and King Courtland, the phrasing of this question matches what you would think or like what you would ask if you saw Venom and Wyvern, but not like dragons and their riders. Violet responds, it depends on the dragon, but usually no. And then Kat chimes in to say griffins do because they bond for life. Varys views this as extremely unwise on the part of the griffins, but I loved Kat's response about Kira Lair when she says, I respect her for who she is and trust whatever decisions she makes. Their sacrifice to bond humans have allowed us to win the Great War and to survive centuries of war after that. So we know that the series is called the Empyrean series, but actually, I would love to know where griffins came from and how they got involved in all of this as well. We know Peromiel has been fighting off the Venin who have been draining their land, but is there something specific similar to like the hatching grounds of dragons that griffins have a vested interest in protecting as well? From what we know, griffins seem to be more even-tempered and just like actually seem to like humans perhaps compared to dragons. So, did they just spawn to protect the land in general? But obviously just as a whole, where did they come from?
That's really interesting. I don't know why I've never questioned the origins of griffins and how they first came to bond riders. It seems in a lot of ways they're very similar to the dragons. They're magical creatures who I assume have hatching grounds and young they want to protect from being drained by venom. And I don't think it
Mhm.
would be a far jump to say they formed an alliance with humans and started bonding them to help protect them from the venom, similar to why the dragons did it with the first six. I would definitely love a download about Griffin history and just how that all came to pass. This thought also made me think of the excerpt from chapter 7 from Lyra's journal, where she talks about how Eratia should be a haven for riders and flyers to have protections under the war.
Yes.
This excerpt seems to further connect them historically and show that griffins and dragons' paths have been intertwined far longer than we realize and I think is talked about. And we know that also griffins and dragons can communicate. So who knows historically how long that they've had a connection, even going farther back than human interference.
Right. Yeah. Griffin Watch.
Griffin
Out
watch.
of the book.
Gems, griffins, then in watch. I mean, what are we not on watch for,
Kat's royal response prompts the conversation to shift toward a discussion of alliances and marriage contracts. Nairi says, "So many young royals here. Why are you not contracted to one another? It seems foolish not to forge futures and provide heirs who could unite your kingdoms." I think this was brought up back in chapter 25 when we get the excerpt about Fenrirson and his marriage being a tool to secure the line. But this question really makes you wonder what else was arranged in the contract between Fen and Talia. Hedotus clearly must have gotten something from Tyrandor because there's no way Hedotus and their calculating asses weren't going to get something in return. Why did they need to be aligned politically for the 10-ish years it took for the marriage, the conception of Xaden, and then the fulfillment of the contract to happen?
I also want to know why Talia specifically was someone chosen at random. Did Fen get to choose? Was she the daughter of a triumvirate member? And so sort of like
Right.
quote unquote royalty for their isle. And that's why she was selected.
Yeah, I agree with that. I still stand by my idea that perhaps Deverelli brokered the deal between Tyrandor and Hedotus. But,
Hmm.
obviously that is still yet to be confirmed.
Retweet. Agreed.
To get back to Nairi's question, Auric answers this time, and with every response from him, I definitely fall a little bit more for his character. He says, "My brother will be king. Heir and alliances aren't my concern. I will fight in this war, most likely die, and do so knowing that I protected others." I do have to admit that I chuckled a little bit when Nairi responds, "Honor has never been the equal of wisdom." She's like, "That's the dumbest shit I've ever heard." But truly, the triumvirate in the culture of Hedotus is so knowledge elitist. They think that just because something logically on paper is smart, that doing anything else is just dumb. And they don't believe in like courage or honor because they believe those actions, I would assume, tend to lead to like quicker deaths or something, which I guess isn't entirely false because it is a physically riskier mindset to have. But I don't know. I don't obviously like Hedotus. To say the
Oh,
least.
Lorraine, it's obvious. I could tell you were feeling real spicy anytime you wrote something about the Isle and their practices.
They're annoying. I don't like them.
If it was unclear, guys, Lorraine is not pro Hedotus. That is her least favorite Isle.
Nairi addresses Xaden next about the fact that his title has been restored and yet he had not secured a marriage yet. This was big because Violet realizes it means Hedotus has current information and they knew about the rebellion and Fen's execution, and that Talia had left knowing what was going to happen. I think we were all raging at Talia for that little truth bomb. I know she was scared she would be executed as well, which is fair, but why not take Xaden then? In an event like the Tyrrish Rebellion, wouldn't it have been safer to take the heir of Tyrandor somewhere else? I think this was the point where I really was like, I've lost any potential sympathy for Talia.
I'd even maybe be willing to forgive her if after Fen Ryerson was executed, she went back for Xaden. But realizing that she knew all along that Xaden was completely alone in that hostile environment and she just left him there. Because this also means she knew that Fenn's sister, Bodhi's mom, was also killed. So Xaden really truly had
Oh, yeah.
no family to take care of him. I mean, he was truly alone in
Oh,
a world in which Eratia had been burned. The
right.
circumstances are
Yeah.
totally dire. And he was still very young when all that happened. And you know what? I'm just getting mad just thinking about it.
Yeah. So Talia steps in with another notable quote, and she says, much of its territory lies beyond their wards, so allegiance to the kingdom has always been weaker than others. It would not surprise me to find that in the course of this war, Tyrandor regained its sovereignty, which is why a lifetime alliance was secured. But you're not. And then she trails off, but it's implied that she's referring to Xaden not being married. First of all, their prediction that Tyrandor could regain its sovereignty through this war cannot be ignored. It seems like Hedotus obviously has a lot of current information regarding continental affairs. And so, what do they know about the Venin or any other political situation that would make them think Tyrandor has a good chance of becoming independent again? Because that's like very
Like,
specific.
well, I mean, in general, it seems like Hedotus has a specific emphasis on politics, right? Their fixation on the contract marriage and forming alliances
Yes.
and stuff. It seems like they have a broader insight to that than most people. So that is very interesting that that's where the conversation goes.
Well, especially because you had the rebellion happen, which was obviously an attempt for Tyrandor to become independent. It didn't work, but then for them to still be like, oh, I still see it as a possibility, then I'm like, what are you not sharing? What do you
Hmm.
know?
What do you know and how do you know it? And tell us now.
Exactly. It also really makes you think about the fact that Tyrandor has the Wordstone in Eratia and how that came to exist in the first place. I definitely feel there's more to Tyrandor's history specifically that seems important just for overall historical context. We know they were the last province to unify with Navarre. They are the only province we know of so far to have attempted a rebellion and secession. And we also know that they have their own wardstone. It also calls back to the excerpt from chapter 7, where it's implied Lyra helped someone named Braxton defend his people, and how she wrote all who channel from dragons and griffin alike should flourish under the wards, and now Horatio will be that haven should one of the others ever return. I think at the time I thought maybe Braxton was a flyer, but now I think Braxton may actually have been a leadership figure in Tyrandor. I don't know. I guess I kind of go back and forth on that, but now I'm leaning that way.
You know, after I read your note, I went back and I reread that. And now reading it makes me think that you're on to something. It has to be someone in leadership because it says defend his people. And that's something a leader
Right.
would say, right? These are my people. I have to protect my people. I
Yes.
think it's possible he could be a leader of a province in Portmeal or part of Portmeal. But
That too. Yes.
Tyrandor is my top guess right now. I think that's how I'm leaning to as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Come into my speculations.
Yes, man. Whatever you say, please don't hurt me, okay? Trust no one. Also, I just have to say, for as many times as I've read these books and stared at the maps, seeing it spelled out like this makes things make so much more sense. I always wondered why, of all the provinces, it was Tyrandor who stood up against Navarre, and now it seems so obvious. But of all the provinces, they are the most impacted and face the biggest risk from Venin because of their borders and the borders of the wards. And that's what's expressed here. And I was like, oh. And I think that said, you know, loosely in Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, but like not as explicitly as it is here. And that's when
Yeah.
the light bulb came on. And I'm like, oh, so in case I'm not the only one, I threw it out there for somebody else. So just know you're not alone.
The other part of Talia's statement that piqued my curiosity is when she said they'd arranged for a lifetime alliance. So initially, I thought this was in reference to a lifetime alliance between Hedotus and Tyrandor through the marriage contract between Fen and Talia. But as we see, the conversation continues, and she's actually alluding to Peromiel and Tyrandor with Kat and Xaden, because Kat jumps in to say, I said yes, he said no. With all this context in mind, it really reframes that chapter 7 excerpt, because I wonder if the original creation of the Eurasian Wordstone was part of a larger political or like negotiating play between Peromiel and Tyrandor. We've seen that getting the Eurasian Wordstone fired up was key in Iron Flame, and theoretically, had it been properly fired up the first time, I think it would have extended into parts of the Krovla province, right? So, securing an alliance between a hypothetically sovereign Tyrandor and Peromiel, specifically the Krovla province area, is highly beneficial to Krovla because it would basically ensure protection for them if the Eurasian Wardstone was working correctly. While I'm going down a historical rabbit hole, there are actually several treaties and trade agreements that take place in the border regions between Tyrandor and Peromiel, specifically around Athene and Resin. You have the trade agreement of Resin, which was signed sometime around 433 AU and ensured the exchange of meat and lumber from Navarre for the cloth and agriculture of Peromiel 4 times a year at the Athene outpost. Then you have the Treaty of Arif, which ensured mutually shared airspace between Navarre and Krovla over a narrow strip of airspace at the Esben Mountains between Somerton and Dreyfus. And on top of all that, you have a multitude of significant events happening within this geographic area. The Battle of Gianfar, which was one of the last battles where dragons and griffins worked together and was pivotal to the unification of Navarre. You have the Second Krovlan Uprising, and then during the Tyrrish Rebellion, Fen allied with Viscount Takaris and Krovla. And then you have the Battle of Resin in Fourth Wing against the Venin take place in that area as well. Last but not least, you also have 2 ancestral hatching grounds near the area. You have the Black Dragons of the Dumadid line, whose ancestral hatching grounds are in Aurasia, while the Blue Dragons of the Gorm Phaeus line had their ancestral hatching grounds somewhere near Cordon in Peromiel. So the evidence is building that there is something specifically important about this area.
Agreed.
Sorry, that was a very long tangent, everybody, but
Hey, don't apologize,
Dora-
okay?
we're
This is what the
ordering
people come
away.
for. I can say that with full confidence because in this moment, I am the people, okay? Or at least part of them. That was chef's kiss. So what she meant to say was, you're welcome for compiling that list for you guys.
There's a reason we're getting all this historical info, and I feel like you just have to start piecing it together, and then maybe at some point we'll get a very enlightened moment of being oh, this is where it's all going.
Wait,
I haven't hit that point yet.
Yeah. At this point, I'm just waiting for Violet to find a history of the world, unredacted,
Right, yes.
fully accurate, no alterations, and then she'll read it to us, and then we'll understand.
Oh, I hope so. I'll take that over my personal speculations any day. So,
Or maybe Theophany will tell us like we talked about in the last episode.
yeah.
Theophany, where are you?
Violet. Yeah. But anyways, okay, to get back to the conversation, Kat continues on to say he met Violet and now they're them. They happen to be 2 of the most powerful writers on the continent. The 2 of them could break and reshape the continent if they choose to. I'm sure this is meant to be a reference to how powerful both Violet and Xaden are power-wise, but what if they actually could? What if they could use their powers to break off the Barrens and separate the area where the Venin are thought to originate from? And on that note, what if this actually happened in the past? What if the Isle Kingdoms were originally part of the continent, but in some great past battle, like the Great War with the first 6, or even before that, they were broken off? Maybe that explains why they all still refer to the continent as Amiralis.
So you're taking it in very literal in the sense of actually reshaping the continent, the physical structure of the continent. Sort of like how people say that at some point, thousands of years from now, California will fall off into the ocean because of the tectonic plate. Okay. That's one of the reasons I'm nervous to go to California because I'm like, that shit will happen when I'm there. Okay. We'll just drift off to Hawaii. Okay. I like where your head is at, but I did go in a different direction. First, let me just say this is definitely foreshadowing for something between Violet and Xaden and their powers. And when I'm talking foreshadowing, I'm talking for book 4 or 5, not in this book. I just kept thinking about Violet and Xaden's powers and how rare they are and how only in certain times in history had those signets manifest concurrently. And I just feel like all of those pieces together make me think there is somehow or some way that Violet and Xaden can merge their powers or something like that and use it as a super weapon against the Venom. So I took the breaking and reshaping more in a metaphorical sense, not in the physical structure. But I feel like that 100% is foreshadowing. That is not a line that we're going to glaze over. And I feel like we'll go back to that in future books. So I like where your head's out. I could see that. Also, I talk about this later, but Ark mentions that they're arrogant to think that there aren't other continents out there. So what
Yes,
if there
yeah.
was another full continent that got broken apart going, towards your theory? I don't know, but it stuck out to me too. When it sticks out to both of us, we're probably on to something.
We're onto something. I can feel it. Okay, yes. Violet quickly realizes that the triumvirate are not judging their intelligence, but instead are dissecting life choices. Fantastic. But things only get weirder.
If we're judging life choices, let me just say I never want to go before the triumvirate.
Oh,
Ain't gonna be me.
never. Never. They'd probably give me a look and I would just go scurrying off. Like,
Yeah,
they
I would
just
just
know.
crumble immediately and be like, I am not wise enough.
The triumvirate ignores their comments, choosing to instead pose a hypothetical marriage of 3 to 4 years between Tyrandor and Peromiel to secure an heir. This is weird as fuck because the way they speak about Tyrandor and Peromiel makes it seem like they have a particularly vested interest in those places allying, and I want to know why. Why would it be so advantageous, and why do they care?
Oh my God. Yes. Even on a first read, I thought this part was really strange. I just kept thinking, why the fuck do they care about marital alliances on the continent? Even if it is a quote unquote wise thing to do, it just doesn't make any sense. Even after several rereads, I still don't get it. Because it's not like a thought experiment. It's like, we'll go to the temple tomorrow and draw up the papers. They're pushing for it, which is just so odd.
Yes.
I also want to point out here the triumvirate wants Xaden and Kat to agree to a contract marriage for 3 or 4 years just for the opportunity to plead their case for an alliance in front of the triumvirate. Not even for like a guaranteed alliance, but just for the opportunity to plead their case. And I was like, are these people fucking insane? Are they crazy?
Absolutely.
Do y'all even have an army? What are we getting out of this alliance? Oh my God, these people are unhinged. Unhinged.
This seems stupid because they don't even have a port. They're aquaphobic.
They're
What army?
aquaphobic. How are they going to get the army there?
Apparently, it doesn't matter. So, all of this is also paired with Garrick chiming in to say if bloodlines equaled allegiance, he wouldn't be sitting here under interrogation. He is your son, right? And then he looks at Talia, who instead chugs her tea. Something feels a little off, in my opinion, about this dynamic. It almost feels like it's implying Xaden is not actually her son, potentially. I don't know. I have more thoughts about this when we get to the chocolate cake incident later, because that definitely felt kind of weird too. But planting the seed here.
I haven't read that far in your notes at this point when I was writing this, but I think I know what you're talking about. And I thought the exact same thing. I think we had the same thought. Something is weird.
Yes.
Something is weird.
Despite the triumvirate continuing with their plans to draw up contract papers, in the most amazing show of support for Violet, Xaden says, bet. Because Xaden wants to marry Violet. I think the best line of the set of chapters was when he said, a lifetime. Anything less is unacceptable. And her full name for the papers is Violet Sorengale. 2 R's.
Oh my God. Absolutely. No question. I actually fainted after reading that. That is the kind of line that makes readers mad at their spouses for the rest of the day. Like you look at them and you're like, ugh. And when they ask why, we just keep belligerently shouting, lifetime, anything less is unacceptable. And they're just like,
Yes.
why? And you're like, why don't you know? You should do better. Like you're just mad at them all day.
Yeah.
I also loved Violet's response. I'm torn between throwing a dagger at his chest and kissing the shit out of him. And even Mira can't help but grin, which I just love because we know Mira is not Xaden's biggest fan. And even she is like, he ain't my favorite, but damn, he's dedicated to my sister. And I'm fucking here for that.
So immediately after this, I loved Garrick chiming in also to suggest they hyphenate. And then he's like, or combine Ryergale, Sorensen.
Personally, I prefer Sorensen. Ryergale doesn't quite have the right ring to it, I feel like.
Rah, Ryergale. Yeah.
Rah, Ryergale. I know at this point we're basically just now reading the scene line by line, but I don't care because this scene was great. I then liked how Violet tried to whisper to Xaden, that's not what they meant. And Xaden at full volume is like, I don't give a fuck what they meant. And you're just like, oh, he does not give a shit. And I am fucking here for it.
Aside from this, though, I did think it was notable that before Xaden specifies who he wants to marry, Nairi says, we could have the legalities performed in the morning at temple and then hear what will no doubt be a plea for our assistance in their war tomorrow. I point that out because it foreshadows how Hedotus was already aware of why they were coming and the fact that this entire meeting was a setup from the very beginning.
I also have to point out here that once again, we're talking about Xaden and Violet getting married. There have been a lot of references and allusions to them getting married. It's actually getting hard for me to think that this isn't where this series will go, or hell, even the end of this book, honestly, because it's starting to stack up a lot.
At this point, Talia jumps in to say, surely the potential of our alliance of sharing our knowledge would make that sacrifice worthwhile. Think of Tyrandor. This just adds to some character building for Talia to help understand why she did what she did, though she is not forgiven. It also points back to the question of what will, Hedotus get from this potential marriage. I was wondering if perhaps it has to do with gems. We've mentioned several times that Pearl Meal is known for their magic amplifying gems, but Ferris also has that we don't know for sure if it's a ruby, but it's like some kind of red gem on that staff.
Probably a ruby.
So I was just wondering if maybe there's something going on in that capacity.
It's possible.
To continue on, my heart broke once again for Xaden when he says, you cannot contemplate the things I have sacrificed for Tyrandor. Violet is the only choice I made for myself. I won't sacrifice her for 3 years, not for a single day. You would know that if you hadn't abandoned me, if you knew me at all.
I hate you, Talia. I hate you.
I know. After this, we do get Talia's full reasoning of why she left, and she states Xaden was Tyrandor's heir and that they would have executed me right next to your father, or in secret as done to Mari's husband. I did what I thought was best. I feel like maybe there's a little bit of validity to that, but ultimately, I think if she really cared about Xaden's safety, she would have found some way to take him with her or get him out of harm's way. Ultimately, I think Talia is a product of Hedonic culture and just didn't view it was a wise decision to try and take Xaden. I would also guess that she probably would have been advised against doing something so quote-unquote emotional from her connections in Hedotus. I'm assuming that she is, I guess, some sort of Hedonic noble or something, and that's how she ended up being arranged to marry Fen in the first place. But as I stated before, I don't agree with her decision, nor do I particularly care for Hedonic culture, but I guess this is how I am understanding her decision. With all that being said, in an attempt to try to get in Talia's frame of mind, I did try and look at it from her perspective. I'm not by any means saying that I agree with what she did, but I can sort of understand how she came to make the decisions that she did. We know this was a contract marriage for her and Ben, aka no love whatsoever. Talia said that she was young when she married and had Xaden, and we also learned that she was afraid for her life because of the rebellion. And since Xaden was the heir to Tyrandor, she couldn't take him back to Hedotus because there would be probably some legal ramifications for that. As someone who personally believes in giving people the right to choose and make decisions for themselves, I see why maybe she wouldn't feel attached to that part of her life because it was something that was done out of necessity rather than true desire. She probably didn't have much of a say at all, and if anything was used as a political tool for her family or the nobles of Hedotus or the Triumvirate or whoever put together all of this. I know that this is a book, but if I was forced into a marriage with someone I didn't love, I can't say that I would love that. And I would probably resent it a lot. I also don't, personally have children, so I can't speak to the specific bond a parent and child develop because I literally have never birthed a child. But personally, I love kids and I just can't see myself being the type to abandon any child because I just love them and I love my friends' kids. But then again, I've never, been in a loveless marriage where I birthed a child because of a contract either. So
it's a very tricky situation to navigate. It's easier for us to judge because we also live in the real world. This is a fantasy world. And then you have the added element of she herself says she was extremely young. We don't know how young, but she could have been even 16, 17, 18. And in her early, not early, but I guess mid-20s when she left. Think about what we were at 17, 18, 19, 20. So you have that added element too. Not to mention, she was probably scared for her life. I mean, rebellion was coming. And so there's a lot that goes into the decision. As someone who has had children, I think it would be difficult, if not impossible, for me to leave them under any circumstance. So a little bit harder for me. I think I just would have packed Zayden in a suitcase and been like, let's go, baby. We're going to Hedonis. I still think she made a lot of decisions in error. And for me, it's not the decisions she made in her past, but it's how she handled the present and likely how she will handle the future. It doesn't seem like she's going to change her choices. And that is what is more damning for me.
So I would also like to say that it seems like the culture of Hedonis and therefore Talia really emphasizes making decisions purely based on logic and strategy with no regard for emotion or morality. The people there kind of seem like emotionless robots. And so,
yes.
I guess that's sort of the overarching theme for this isle and all the isles for that matter. We are really seeing how a culture is affected when you emphasize like one particular character trait and disregard others. We clearly see how cold and heartless the culture of Herodotus is. They may be smart and logical and wise, quote unquote, but they're also compassionless and have zero fucking empathy, which, in my opinion, is no way to live. As Indarna likes to say, nature likes all things in balance, and I think people are no exception.
That is some excellent analysis. I have no notes. I wholeheartedly agree with you on all accounts and Indarna.
There were some moments and reactions from her that made me think, maybe she cares for Zayden, or maybe she feels guilty or has some remorse for how she did things. But overall, with the culture she was raised in and, seeing her new life and everything, I just don't really feel convinced of that. And it certainly was not enough to make me like her. So
I think very similarly, it's certainly a confusing relationship to navigate because so much of what Talia does is easy to disapprove of. Plus, we love Zayden and we know him more and we get his perspective more. And we really don't for Talia. But I think ultimately Talia has had many opportunities to make things right or do things differently. And she chose not to. And it seems like will likely continue to choose not to. And I think that's how I kind of land. Yeah, I'm anti-Talia. Now, I do wonder if we'll see her in the future in the books or if this is the end of her story with Zayden. I could kind of see it being either way, I'm really unsure of where they stand now.
I don't know. I'm curious about how this interaction, just like hypothetically speaking here about different plot points, but I wonder if Talia's opinion of her marriage to Ferris will change after this interaction.
Oh, right. Because she's kind of now in the same situation. She knows that Ferris is bad, literally tried to poison her son or sons. A little foreshadowing there. Okay. But now she's in the same situation. Where can she go? She has 2 other young children. Ooh, that's interesting.
I think Talia has been used pretty frequently and is probably a little too far into like the culture to think otherwise of things. But I mean, clearly Ferris didn't give a fuck about her life.
Oh, yeah. He was like, Talia, who? I can't lose.
Yeah. And so, I don't know. It's all just messed up. Okay.
That place is fucked up.
So after this, things obviously get very emotional, which the triumvirate does not approve of. But this was when it's ultimately revealed through Mira's analysis that the entire meeting was a setup. Mira says, "We proved our lack of wisdom by coming here in the first place. You were never going to share your knowledge or ally yourself with us."
Oh my God. I loved Mira's speech here. I wanted to give her a standing ovation. She gave them the fucking business. Oh, I love Mira.
Somehow this, however, earns some respect from Nairi, who pulls out a jade stone from her robe. And I was like, add it to the jump watch. It seems like each of the triumvirate has a jade stone, and they pull them out while assessing Violet's answer to the next question. But to provide some information about jade stone in Chinese culture, it is considered a stone of heaven and is associated with prosperity, good luck, success, longevity, and immortality. Don't know how that connects yet, but maybe it will. So Nairi shifts the convo to a discussion of the dearest, which Violet answers this time. She ultimately assesses the city as a place that is both perfectly laid out, but also cruel for destroying the historical base of the city, homes your citizens have lived in for generations, through their reconstruction, thus demonstrating an intolerance for anything that is not beautiful and efficient. I also thought it was interesting that when Violet asked why they don't have a port as a coastal city, Ferris' response is unwise to venture over water when we know next to nothing about what lurks within its depths. Violet thinks perhaps they're aquaphobic, which could be, but I wonder if there's something else they know, or like maybe there's something else going on. I don't know. I guess logically it makes more sense to take that at face value, but I feel like it's a little bit odd.
Yes, logically, that is correct. Honestly, I did take it at face value. It's still very odd and random. My initial thought when they first got there and Violet noticed there was no port was that it was related to the defense of the island. Like they didn't want any
Oh,
ships
yeah.
having access. But sure, we'll go with aquaphobic. That's fucking weird.
I know.
Which I'm assuming they fish and eat like food from the ocean. So I don't know. It's weird.
Next, Rosalind criticizes their assessment of Vidiris because they don't even know the name of their own continent. It's been highly implied that the continent is called Armoralis, but I'm glad to get some confirmation finally. Violet thinks every other isle worships one member of the pantheon, and though we celebrate all, we hold one above all others, Amari. Arik also once again whips out some really opportune information when he states it's Amaralis, according to ancient royal records, though I believe Poromish records called it Amalicus. The only thing our kingdoms ever agreed on was calling it the continent after the Great War. I don't know why this feels important, but I think it's going to come back up later. It seems like such a weird thing to argue over, but clearly there is a distinction that matters between Amaralis and Amalicus. So,
Also, all right, Addison's going to pick a weird place to plant a hill and die on it. I also took note of when Arik said, rather arrogant of us to simply refer to it as a continent as though there aren't others beyond the sea. I'm going to say this here and now. In book 4 or
Yay!
5, we're going to go to the Emerald Sea. We're going to go explore and we're going to find another damn continent. I said what I said. I'm saying it here now. So in,
Wow.
2, 3, whatever, how many fucking years from now, we're going to put these clips together and everyone's going to be like, damn, Addison was right. So Margaret, what is today? March 9th, 2025.
Ooh, another continent.
I
I wonder
believe
what
that.
lurks over there.
I know. No, I really do believe that. I also fucking love Nairi's response because it pretty much is the theme for Ark's character. She says, you're rather quiet for someone who seems to know so much. And that's exactly what I'm fucking saying. He is very quiet for someone who fucking knows everything at the most opportune time.
He doesn't want to show his hand yet, He waits.
I guess.
Anyways, okay. Arik is not done with his clapbacks, however, and I thought it was hilarious that he tells the triumvirate, honestly, I find you lacking, and I'm not sure I want you for an ally. You have no army, and you're stingy with the very thing that should be free to all, knowledge. And I was like, hell yeah. How nice would it have been for everyone if all the history had been correct and known by everybody from the very beginning?
What a dream. What a dream.
Wow. Could never be Navarre.
Could never be Navarre. He ain't like that. Mm-mm.
I also love that Arik backs up the squad's decision to put Violet in command despite his noble rank when he says she's in command, and with the exception of her rather questionable taste in men, I've trusted Violet's wisdom since childhood.
He just had to throw in that little dig at Xaden.
Yeah.
And I guess Halden, too. Violet does sort of have questionable taste in men when you think about it.
The triumvirate is surprised that Violet is bonded to 2 dragons, and one is the 7th breed of dragon. I couldn't tell if Rosalind's response indicates that they know anything about the 7th dragon breed, but it does impress Rosalind that she's bonded to 2 dragons, thus earning her the respect of 2 out of the 3 triumvirate. The final test question comes from Ferris, who asks if you truly seek knowledge, why do you not worship Hedian? Why would you not take up residence here like the others who seek wisdom instead of allyship? I also loved Violet's response to this when she says, I was taught that wisdom is never to be prayed for, but earned. I'm not going to hide on an isle while the people I love are condemned to death by draining. At this point, they are interrupted by the servers to ask if they want dessert, and this is when we get a true shocking twist. Ferris comments that he hoped the cook had done something with the chocolate that Talia had been stockpiling for weeks, which indicates that they'd known for weeks that the squad would arrive. A couple things happen at once. First, Ferris asks what kind of information, a weapon to destroy them perhaps, in reference to Violet's question about the venom. I did have to ask, at this point the triumvirate is well aware of the war that's happening with the venom. They know the squad seeks answers about the venom and the 7th dragon breed. Do you think Hedotus actually knows anything about the venom? They never supply any answers or react much when the venom are mentioned, so I can't really tell. It seems like, if anything, they're just getting information from them, but so they aren't willing to share anything in return.
I'm going to say yes, they do. It's a good question. I can see why you go back and forth on it. There's a couple of things. So the first is, it's pretty clear that they're up to date on what goes on all over the continent. That would imply to me that they have to know about the existence of venom, right? Historically, they seem to know. I think they probably know the true motivations behind the Tirish rebellion. Navarre spun it as they wanted to cede from Navarre, but in reality, it was over their lack of involvement with the venom. And I just assumed that the triumvirate would know that. I also think whenever Violet talks to Ferris at the end and she says, it'll become your war, and he says, we don't have any magic here, that also would imply to me he knows what venom are, that they drain magic. So I think that they do. All signs pointed that they do. And I feel like if they didn't know anything about the venom, they would just straight up ask them because they like to know things. Plus, then you throw in the whole element of they have crossbolt and then tie that into our conversation about firebringers, wyverns versus dragons. In general, I would be surprised if they didn't, to be totally honest.
I'm just waiting at this point for the full answer to be like, yes, there were venom here at some point. This is why everybody has crossbolts.
Yes.
And there's no magic anywhere. Now
Yeah.
let's move on from that question. I ask this like on every single aisle. I'm like,
no,
do they know
it's a
about
fair
magic?
question.
Do they know about dragons? Do they know
What do they
about
know?
venom? Yeah. So next, slices of chocolate cake are placed in front of everyone. And as soon as Ferris calls out that the 4 forks for the triumvirate and Talia are missing, the alarm bells start to go off. Talia plays up her little motherly facade with testing out recipes and stuff to get it perfect, which I feel like is bullshit. Maybe she was being genuine.
Oh, I thought she's being genuine, actually, about that.
Okay. Violet realizes that something was wrong and they better eat that chocolate cake out of there. Violet stops Xaden from eating the cake, which gives Auric, Mira, and Kat pause. But not Garrick, who'd already eaten a third of his piece.
God damn it, Garrick. Oh!
Garrick passes out and then stops breathing, and that's where the chapter ends.
And Garrick's not the only one, okay? Rebecca got me so good. I wish more than anything I had a video of my reactions as I was laying in the dark at 2 a.m. listening to this, because I was fighting for my life, guys.
Crazy. Okay. That ends chapter 35. Moving on to chapter 36, the excerpt. This was another passage from Captain Asher Sorengale's research on Hedotus, and it discusses how Hedotus gives its citizens a citizenship test that reminds them of the entrance exam for the scribe quadrant. The difference, however, is that the scribe test seems to measure how much a potential cadet has learned, while Hedotus aims to prove how much one has not learned. I don't know what the consequence of not passing a citizenship test is for the people here, but if it's anything like what happened with the squad, then everybody better stay away. There's definitely no like growth mindset or positive reinforcement happening here. It also makes it super ironic that Ferris last chapter tries to make Bisgaiath kind of sound awful with the process for becoming a writer and everything, and yet he literally tried to kill them as a test.
You know, I hadn't thought of that, but that is an excellent fucking point. Of all the aisles so far, I think they're the most contradictory, hypocritical, shitty.
Just
everything, just shitty.
We pick up right after the events of the last chapter, and Violet immediately calls for Taryn and the other dragons while everyone scrambles to help Garrick, who is not breathing. And it's noted that Talia is staring horror-stricken at Garrick while Violet asks what was in the cake. So, first and foremost, do you believe that Talia didn't know the cake was poisoned? I don't think Talia necessarily knew the cake was going to be poisoned because she reaches for it and Ferris is like, no, not for you, dear. She definitely knew that they were coming, but I guess not that the test would be lethal.
I 100% do not think she knew it was poisoned for the reasons you just pointed out, but also as much as Talia sucks, I really do not think she would ever purposefully harm Xaden, and I don't think she would have let Ferris do this if she knew Xaden could potentially die. Or if she did know and couldn't have stopped Ferris, then I think she would have warned them 100%. I just don't, that's not in her nature.
Talia's response to Ferris, though, is what made me narrow my eyes because she says, "You poisoned my son." And Ferris responds, "Your son was wise enough not to eat it." I noted her specific words because Zayden, her presumed son, did not eat the cake and is not currently passed out on the floor. And yet she says, "You poisoned," rather than like, "You tried to poison my son," you know? And then thinking about how Garrick asked, "He is your son, right?" earlier in the conversation, I'm probably just being suspicious, but it feels a little weird.
Oh, I'll fucking say it. Is Garrick Talia's son? Is he Zayden's brother? I'm sorry. This is too weird to ignore. We're talking about one easy word. You poisoned my son. You tried to poison my son. Big
Right.
fucking difference, okay? I also want to point out that in the actual text, the word son is italicized, which is meant to show emphasis. Something is up with this. My brain is just like, and they're the same age, they're in the same year, they studied together. Like, bitch, what? Even if he's like
Does she
half
have like
brother.
twins?
I don't know. Twins, half brother. I don't know. But that was weird.
Wait, how would a half brother work?
It can be through her, it'd be through Fen. They had the same dad, but different moms.
Yeah, but then Talia wouldn't be Garrick's mom.
Oh, shit. Yeah.
So like maybe they were fraternal twins.
Hey, no, it's totally possible. No, honestly. And I don't know the birthdays and like how tight the math is, but like, what if she had one of them got pregnant very shortly after giving birth and then had another? You know, like Irish twins.
True.
I don't know.
And
I don't
like
know.
one of them was just delayed in entering the quadrant or something, and like nobody really knew.
I think how you get to enter the quadrant depends on your birthday. So depending on how their birthdays fall, maybe they got to enter the same year. Or they just lied about their fucking birthdays. Who knows? I don't know. Shit's weird. Yeah. That shit is weird, okay? There's something to that. I'm not gonna die on the hill yet, but like, goddamn, we cannot be the only ones who've noticed that.
Anyways, in an attempt to figure out what was in the cake, Violet sniffs at it and it's noted, "I breathed deeply, catching a hint of something sickly sweet, like the fruit that's been left in the sun too long." And this is the moment where on my first read, I was finally like, oh my God, the Zakia berries. But at this point, Violet has not pieced it together yet.
Yes, absolutely. That was a very nicely placed detail to help give us a hint, left in the sun too long.
I will say Ferris has a lot of nerve baiting them into a reaction by asking, "Is this the part where you draw a weapon?" And Violet is a better person than I am because I for sure would have chucked the plate at his head for that.
A plate? How about a dagger?
Oh, I know. Fortunately, in a brilliant and shocking twist of events, Violet instead reveals that she'd already poisoned the triumvirate and Talia. Specifically, she says, "This is the part where I tell you I've already killed you," which was flawlessly epic.
Absolutely. I cannot wait for this scene when the show finally happens because it is going to be fucking epic.
I hope. Yes.
Oh my God. I know it's going to be years and years down the road, because I have to actually like make the show and do seasons, 1, 2, and 3 before they get here. But oh my God.
She goes on to specify that though they are breathing, they will soon be vomiting. And once their bile turns blue, then it's game over for them. I thought it was hilarious that Ferris was like, "I watched you drink and eat everything we did." But Violet was like, "But not before, dumbass." Just kidding. She didn't say that, but the sentiment was the same. We quickly learned that the squad had already taken doses of antidote for the iron mint tea that they all drank during the meal. Violet suggests a deal to trade respective antidotes, but Ferris refuses, believing he has more time than they do to find the antidote and kill them all before Garrick dies. I loved Violet's response when she said, "I wish you the best. You have mediocre guards. I have 10 lethally trained riders and flyers, 4 griffins, and 7 pissed off dragons. The odds are in my favor." I was like, take that, Ferris.
Yeah, what she said.
At this point, Dane and Traeger enter the dining room to help, and Traeger helps Zayden with CPR. I just couldn't believe how egotistical Ferris is. Violet thinks Ferris isn't responding to a threat to his own life, or even his wife's. It goes against every base instinct I have. And then, after Taryn tells her to think like him, she thinks he'd rather die than lose. And I think this is where it really occurred to me how detrimental this overemphasis on being wise and intelligent and right really is within the Hedonic culture. It's kind of ridiculous that Ferris has no self-preservation or desire to save his wife, the literal mother of his children, because he'd rather risk dying then help them with the test. It's just like the stupidest way to die.
It's a crazy way to live. This is just so greatly juxtaposed by the entire dynamic of the quest squad. If the roles were reversed, literally any one of them would have handed over the antidote immediately without question because they're normal, sane people who care about each other's existence.
Yes.
And it's even crazier when you think about the fact that a lot of them aren't like the biggest fans of each other, right? Like Violet and Kat aren't super close. Mira and Drake aren't super close. All right, Kate, Satan.
Right.
But even through all of those dynamics, I feel like they all would have been like, well, you're part of the squad. Like, we're going to take care of each other.
Right.
And meanwhile, Ferris is like, I don't give a fuck about my life or my wife's. I'm going to win. You're just like, what?
There's like no loyalty or like
It's
not even
crazy.
loyalty. Yeah, it
I
is.
don't even know what you
crazy.
call it.
So Violet quickly has Mira take over, securing the rest of the house for threats while she has Dane go get her dad's research on Hedotus. And then Violet and Riddick go after the cook in the kitchen. The servants direct them to the pantry where they find the cook who refuses to tell them what he put in the cake and instead chooses violence.
Oh my God. These people.
I thought it was funny how after Violet throws the dagger at him, she says, I told you not to do that. He's trying so hard to fight them, and they're like, that's a really bad idea. So after his failed attempt, the cook tries begging for his life instead, and it's at this moment Violet realizes that the blue color under his fingernails matches the blue-edged towel she'd seen earlier, indicating that the towel was not, in fact, just designed that way. As they start looking for bluish things, Riddick complains that everything, including the birds, are white, thus triggering Violet's realization that her father had in fact given her the answer she needed. Cue the berries.
And once again, I am reminded that I should have spoken up about those damn berries and those stupid birds, and I could be reveling in a moment of triumph. And right now, instead, I'm just sad. What could have been?
Oh, no. Violet finally realizes what was in that damn chocolate cake, but not so fast. The cook comes back for some knife vengeance, and I think we all collectively gasped in shock when Violet notes a knife is lodged in Riddick's side. I was genuinely panicked when I first read this scene. As you already stated many times, Rebecca got us so good in this set of chapters.
Remember, again, in my bed, 2 a.m., trying not to scream and cry. Okay, so now you have Garrick basically dead on the floor and Riddick who has now been stabbed in his side. And I'm like, no.
Oh.
I was terrible. That was like a very terrible 20 minutes for me.
I agree. But yeah, okay, that ends chapter 36. Moving on to our final chapter, chapter 37, the excerpt. And a change of pace from the usual excerpts, this one was from recovered correspondence of Violet to Rhiannon. Violet notes that she wishes Rhea and Sawyer were with them, but she was grateful to have Riddick and his sarcasm. I'm a little sad that we haven't really gotten to see Rhea or Sawyer much, other than like toward the beginning of the book. Mostly I just miss them, and I miss the whole squad being together.
I really do too. I miss Violet and Rhiannon's friendship scenes. They were together so much in Iron Flame. And it's just hard to adjust because in this book, they're basically never together. And I don't like that.
Yes, I don't like it either. To make a small connection, I feel pretty sure that this was probably one of the missives that Talia had helped Violet send out that's mentioned in chapter 34.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good point. I didn't even think about that, but yeah. I also thought this excerpt is pretty straightforward and speaks to Riddick's sarcasm that we all know and love. But on the first read, this excerpt made my soul leave my body because it 100% gives you the feeling that this is Riddick's goodbye chapter. Like the levity
Really?
of like, oh, yeah, because like before you know that Riddick's going to be okay, there's a knife in his side. And the next excerpt is about what Riddick brings to the group. And you think, oh my
that's true,
God,
yeah.
this is it.
As is expected, Violet is panicking at the thought that Riddick has been stabbed. But Violet's thoughts about Riddick were so sweet because she genuinely couldn't fathom the thought of losing her friend.
Violet thinks not Riddick, not anyone, but especially not Riddick. And I feel I can safely say Violet was speaking for the entire fandom in this moment because that is how we all felt, okay? We don't want anyone to die, but absolutely under no circumstance can Malik have Riddick. I refuse.
Never.
Never.
Yeah. Violet thinks this isn't happening, not again. Not when we're thousands of miles from home and he hasn't graduated or fallen in love or gotten to live. Just as like a side note, because I didn't know if I was like missing something. But when she thinks not again, was she just speaking generically to someone in the squad getting hurt, like Sawyer at the end of Iron Flame? Or did something specific happen to Riddick that I am not remembering?
No, something definitely did happen to Riddick specifically. In Iron Flame, when they are taking the Griffins through the treacherous path on the mountain to Erasia, one of the traps gets triggered and Riddick gets shot by an
That's
arrow.
right.
And he only
I forgot about
survives
that.
because Brennan is there and Brennan mends him.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Yes, I totally forgot about that. Oh,
Yeah. So she had some real PTSD there.
oh my gosh. Okay. Fortunately, Riddick will live to see another day because the knife actually just caught his flight jacket instead. Ha!
Oh my gosh.
Naturally, we wouldn't love Riddick without his comedic relief, and he goes on to punch the cook several times, stating, I have 4 uniforms, but only 1 flight jacket, and I hate sewing.
Iconic. Iconic.
It also melted my heart when he sees Violet and tells her, yeah, I love you too. But then I laughed again when he adds, I want a patch for this ship, Violet, a Quest Squad patch.
Oh my gosh. The way I was on the verge of tears, and then I felt this weird, like, bubble of relief in my chest, and then Riddick just swooped in there and said exactly what I needed to hear. God, I love him.
He's so great.
He really
They head
is.
back to the dining room where things are more or less the same with everyone, but we get that lovely confirmation that it was indeed the Zakia berries. Violet searches her dad's book and finds that to treat poison from fermented Zakia berries, you need fig or lime to the back of the throat within 1 hour. So this is my one like little big conspiracy moment for this chapter, I guess. But Violet has Dane go get some figs from the tray Talia had brought them earlier. And this detail is kind of what made me just a little suspicious that maybe she was in it on it. In general, it's probably possible that the figs are just like a common snack in Hedotus, but what are the odds that she brings them food that is also the antidote for Zakia berry poisoning, you know?
I'm picking up what you're putting down, but I still really believe she didn't know.
Yeah, that's the logical thing. Violet confronts Ferris about his lack of enthusiasm to help them with a war that could very easily spread to the Isles, warning, you think they will come here once they've drained every last ounce of magic from our home. So Ferris does respond to say, we're safe, we have no magic. And then Violet says, foolish man, they'll drain you. Yikes.
Which they certainly will.
Everyone returns with their instructed items, and bless up, the fig paste works. Garrick's eyes flash open, and they get him to drink the rest of the fig slurry. And fortunately, they are also under the hour mark that Papa Sorengale warned about. A few minutes later, with another threat from Violet that Ferris better pray to Hedian, Garrick does wake up. He did take the experience like a champ when he says, this is my least favorite aisle. And I was like, I agree, Garrick.
Well, I always thought the funniest possible thing he could say, like almost dead, and then he wakes up and he's like, I don't like it here.
Yeah.
He was just so excited to get some chocolate cake that tasted like home, and it literally almost killed him.
So just as a quick God Watch note, Violet sees Zayden's head fall back like he's giving thanks to Zanal or perhaps Malik for not claiming his best friend. But to continue, Ferris, that dumb little weasel, still refuses to concede. But we get a little bit of Vaden action when he launches up to shove Ferris against the wall and punches him. What I found interesting about this part is that when Riddick tries to step in, Zayden glares at him in a way that, quote, freezes the blood in Violet's veins. Violet steps in, and it's also noted that Dane's eyes narrow as she turns to Zayden. I kind of wonder if Riddick and Dane are going to suspect something. I would be surprised if no one thought anything of this because it clearly stunned them to see this behavior out of him.
I went back and forth in this. It does seem a little more intense than normal, but it's not totally out of character for Zayden. Remember, we know the soft, loving side of Zayden, but he's absolutely ruthless. And this behavior seems to track for Zayden's character, given that Ferris literally tried to poison them all, could have killed Violet, and almost did kill Garrick. So I think it's one of those your subconscious picks up on that there's something odd, but I don't think the squad will dwell on it too much given the circumstances, the heat at the moment, and just how Zayden normally is.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just because, like, Dane's eyes narrowed. And, like, he turned on Riddick. And
Yeah.
so I feel like that's probably the thing where I'm like, I don't know. I guess we'll see. Violet whispers to him, get off the ice, come back to me because I need you. And the selling point to me that this is a Vaden moment is when it says his eyes flicker with recognition, and then he pushes off the wall and lets Ferris go. Violet instructs everyone to get packed up and ready to leave while she goes back to negotiating with Ferris. She puts Ferris in his place when she taunts him with the antidote to their armament poisoning and then says he will have Hedotus allied with Navarra through the bloodline, aka Xaden, and the contract marriage. She also threatens that he will work with them because A, his reputation as a leader in Hedotus would be ruined if anyone found out he was outsmarted, and B, and Darna is currently outside Ferris's parents' house and would stay there until the squad was out of the range of the weapons. Ugh, it was like such a satisfying twist to read. It was top tier clever, and I loved reading to see just like how everything unfolded.
Me too. I loved every time Ferris would try to say something like, "You'll never make it out if you're alive." And she just responded, "We will." Or she'd be like, "You won't."
Yes.
Which is so
Yep.
satisfying.
I also thought it was notable that Ferris doesn't really act surprised when Violet tells him that the reason no one saw Andarna is because she is an Irid. I feel like if he hadn't known about the Irids, he would have asked about it or been surprised by that or something.
True,
you know?
but yeah, true. But given the peril of the situation, I feel like that might have not been the best time for him to question Violet, you know?
True, yeah. We also learned exactly what Violet had done with the armament when she reveals that she'd combined it with the shredded bark of Tarsilla bush, turning into a poison. And I think at this point, I'm forever adding Plant Watch to our book because every time some plant is mentioned, it always comes back.
Always, freaking always. Yes, absolutely. So, as we mentioned earlier, way back at the beginning of Onyx Storm, after Violet gets back from the rescue mission for Marin's family, her knee is all jacked up. Brennan mends it and gives her Arrowmint. This was followed by a conversation between Xaden, Brennan, and Violet about how it is illegal to take Arrowmint outside of Tyrrendor. We had a conversation back then about that because it stood out to us that a healing herb would be banned from export. And I speculated that it would come back up, and boy, was I right. So it turns out it's illegal to take out of Tyrrendor because it's too risky, and a lot of people could accidentally poison themselves unintentionally because it looks just like regular mint. So now always be on the lookout if mint is ever mentioned because you're like, could it be Arryn mint with other things or just regular mint?
Yeah, not sure. Ferris begrudgingly agrees, though. He still insists Violet didn't outsmart him, but when Violet states, "I didn't outsmart you alone, my father helped me," that stuck out to me. Ferris responds, "The eyes, I should have recognized your eyes. You're Asher Daxton's girl." And I was like, ooh. I guess this does call back to the very beginning of the set of chapters when Ferris comments on how unusual her eyes are. But it also confirms Ferris knew Asher, which is interesting. We keep asking this and we'll keep asking it, but for what purpose did Asher come to Hedotus in the past?
We want to know, damn it.
Ferris drinks the antidote, thus sealing their deal as new allies, and poor Xaden doesn't give Talia another look as the squad departs. The squad flies northwest along the trade routes through the night, heading toward the next isle, Zahilna. It's clear Violet is getting increasingly worried about the fact that they only had 2 more major isles to search and they wouldn't have time to search all the minor isles, yet they are still no closer to finding Andarna's kind. We do get another rune update when Violet notes the power in the Sun Shield's rune still holds and her skin remains unburned as the temperature warms. As a reminder, Violet was given a handful of runes tempered into amethyst quartz discs this time, and Violet also recognizes the rune as matching one of the daggers Xaden gave her the previous year. This also serves as confirmation that somehow this rune does work in places without magic. We had a whole discussion about this last episode, if anyone wants to hear about it. So
go back and listen to that because we cannot rehash that conversation
No.
again, not without new information.
They have another hour before they reach the mainland, and while the dragons and griffins are pushing their physical limits, I did find it sweet that Kat and Kira Lair slowed down to fly next to Traeger and Silverine. That's very nice of them. As they get closer and closer, something that is odd is that while the Isles still had crossbolts, the people wave at them as they fly over. Tara notes that it's unsettling, and I agree because we've seen that the other Isles so far have been extremely wary of dragons, and so this is like a very unexpected response. In addition, Violet notes that the color of the leaves and trees are brighter than they were on Hedotus, which seems like a good sign. even if the color still isn't as rich as it is on the continent.
Which I think is quick foreshadowing that the Isle has magic because the colors are more vibrant. We know that Violet's noted a correlation between that as well as the excerpt that Asher wrote about the different hues of colors and whether Navarre is the rule or the exception.
This Isle definitely sounds like the most beautiful one so far as they pass over several waterfalls and eventually make it to Zortris, the capital city. Things get even more odd when they head toward the main gate, where they are met with an entire amphitheater filled with thousands of people cheering, and in Darna notes, they're expecting us. I'll admit I wasn't quite sure how to feel. I wanted to be excited because the people are, and it makes you feel like maybe they'll finally get some answers or find Darna's kind here. But then on the other hand, all the Isles so far have ended up being more dangerous and then twisting things with their own tricks. And so that also just makes you kind of wary to trust them.
Oh, yeah. I'm not going to lie. I don't like this at all. I feel like this gives the vibes of the beginning of a horror movie. I'm a big scaredy cat and I never watch scary movies, but unfortunately, sometimes in a theater, I am forced to watch the trailers. And I feel like this is a very classic. They seem so nice and friendly at first, but then as things go on, they do or say something that's just like a little creepy. And it gets a little weirder and weirder until you realize they're like trying to kill you. And that's the vibes it's giving.
Ugh, yikes. But of course, who didn't get excited when Taryn and Violet both feel a buzz of energy and they realize it's magic? I got really, really excited because after all this time, I was like, finally! Obviously, I want to know why they have magic when none of the other Isles do. Is it because of dragons, or is there some god stuff at play with Zenal just like blessing the Isle, or the Isle being lucky to randomly have it? I don't know. Lots of questions per usual.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking maybe it's because of Indarna's kind. They're there or close by. I don't know. The only way to find out is to keep reading.
Per usual. But that officially concludes our assembly meeting. And so now we just have our favorite moments to share.
Okay, so to start off our favorite moments, one of the things that I really loved is in Violet and Xaden's very difficult conversation about Talia when she says, "You have to do whatever's best for you, whatever you can live with once we leave here. Whatever choice you make will be the right one as far as I'm concerned. You have all my support." And who didn't love that?
That was very nice.
Yeah.
My first favorite one was from Andarna. Because, Andarna gonna Andarna. And it's when she says, "Are we scheming? I do enjoy scheming." And then my next one was from Auric. And it's when he tells the Triumvirate she's in command. And with the exception of her rather questionable taste in men, I've trusted Violet's wisdom since childhood. That's funny.
I love Auric. This is perhaps the greatest line of the entire book. I loved it. And this was a shared one between Lorraine and I. It's when Xaden stands up and says, "Draw up the papers." And they're like, "Oh, how long?" And he says, "Lifetime. Anything less is unacceptable." And her full name for the papers is Violet Sorngill. 2 R's.
2 R's.
2 R's.
That one was excellent. We had a lot of shared ones, shared favorite moments in this set of chapters. So the next one is from Riddick, providing our favorite comedic relief. And it's when he says, "I want a patch for the ship, Violet, a Quest Squad patch."
And she's like, "Understood. Yep, absolutely."
Yes. Yeah.
Similarly, I love when Riddick gets mad at the cook and he says, "I have 4 uniforms, but only 1 fucking flight jacket, and I hate punch sewing." I love that.
Yes. And of course, to close this out for today, I had one from Violet, and it's when she tells Ferris, "You didn't win. You're dying." And I think that qualifies you as the loser.
Sure does.
And so, yeah, that concludes our episode. So thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Book Dump Fantasy podcast. As always, we are so glad you found us. So please leave us a review, subscribe to the podcast, and follow us on Instagram or YouTube to keep up with us on a daily basis. And that's all we've got for you guys today.
So stay violent.
And we'll catch you all next week. Bye.
Bye. And stay tuned for some bloopers. Chapter 35. Dinner is... Wait, okay. You start that again. Okay. Violet's scribe brain went into overdrive. There was something... Oh, overdrive. Take a pause. Okay.
Auric answers this time with every response from him. And, Auric answers. Oh my god. Okay.
Answer. Auric answers.
Auric answers. So now he has a British accent.
I like
Look
that.
at it.
Also, my camera did not. It's like doing weird again. Don't do that. Stupid thing. Okay.